Hello everybody, this is General Yanis, and today in Death Card Tactics I'm looking at the Volkite Contemptor and specifically if we have any other alternatives to use instead of the Volkite Contemptor. As you might well know, the Volkite Contemptor is a very competitive, very high damage output unit, and if we don't have them or if something gets changed in the rules, do we have some other alternatives for our Chaos armies like Death Guard and Thousand Suns? So do we have any contenders? Some alternatives to the Volkite Contemptor. So with no further ado, let's get straight to it. So today is the 2nd of December. This week I had a small crusade game, 50 power level. I used my Thousand Suns starting crusade list, Scarab Terminators, Rubrics, Helbrute, Infernal Master, Changors, etc. And I met again Grey Knights, and they proved to be my big nemesis. Very difficult to face, but it was quite fun to play Thousand Suns versus Grey Knights because those armies feel like very strong against each other. They match the psychic prowess, so it was really fun game. In the end I lost my whole roster, all the army, but I won the mission. The opponent had the Grandmaster Dread Knight left on the table at turn 4. So really fun game with Thousand Suns versus Grey Knights. But today, as I said, looking at the Volkite Contemptors, the most competitive choice for long-range shooting with very high damage output. So the question is, what other alternatives do we have if they get nerfed or points increase, etc., or you don't have access to Volkite Contemptors? Some of the lists I have been reviewing, people have been asking, what if I don't have the Volkite Contemptors, what can I use that gives me something similar? Also, people have been discussing in the forums, does a Mephitic Blightholder, can it do the same job as a Contemptor, etc. So in this video, we'll be looking at the Contemptor's basic and damage output. And then we'll be looking at, are there any Death Guard alternatives, any Thousand Suns alternatives, and then some other Forgeworld model alternatives. And then, of course, summary and final conclusions. So with no further ado, let's get started. So quickly on the Contemptor Volkites, the basics for why this unit is so strong. I've made a previous review discussing the damage and in detail. I'll put a link here. So basically the competitive Contemptor list is 2 times Twin Volkite Culverins, and then you can have the missile, the Hellforged, the Cyclone missile launcher as a cherry on the cake. I didn't have I only ordered with Volkites. I now I also got the missile. Basically in this video I'll be mostly focusing on the Volkites. The missile just adds you a bit more damage. Of course, if you have it, take it. It's a good choice as well. They cost 150 to 175 points if you include the missile or not, and you also have to pay 1 command point to bring a Contemptor. And the whole idea with the Volkite Culverin is that each of the Volkites, it gives you 8 shots, strength 6, AP 0, damage 2, so it's good also with damage 2. But the crucial thing is that every time you get an unmodified wound roll of 6 to wound, you make additionally 1 mortal wound. So with high volume of fire, and if you can get rerolls and exploding 6s and stuff like that, you could potentially be doing a very high amount of mortal wounds on top on anything that is unsaved. And of course, the Volkite Culverin doesn't have a very high AP, so if you're shooting at stuff that have a 2+ save, they will probably not take so much damage from the actual weapon, but they might still take a lot of extra mortal wounds. The Cyclone missile launcher has basically the 2 profiles. You have 2 crack missiles, so good D6 weapon for versus vehicles, or frag missiles, 2 D6 frag missiles, blast weapon for hordes. So of course, a nice complementary to the Volkites. The Volkites additionally have a very high range, 45 inches, so good on 2000 point games where you can shoot basically anything you could see across the table. And a lot of, maybe if you are facing multi-melt or something, they have to come to 24-inch to even shoot at your Contemptors. So the Contemptors also, additionally with the Volkites, have a nice range advantage. So additionally, the Contemptor is a core unit, and this makes it easy to buff it, and especially Death Guard has very strong buffing potential for the Contemptor. So most importantly, the Talisman, the Tollkeeper relic, gives exploding sixes to hit on core units nearby Talisman. So basically, from the 16 shots, you might be wounding with 20 shots or 22 shots. You can give it +1 to hit. For Death Guard, this Talisman can give a Contemptor to be hitting on 2 pluses. The Thousand Suns have the Presage psychic power that has the same thing, so easy to give them +1 to hit. Then reroll once to hit, as this is core. Any HQ for Death Guard and Thousand Sun, you can give it reroll once, so hitting on 2s, rerolling once, and Death Guard can get exploding 6s. You can also give them reroll all to hit if you have Mortarion and Magnus. Not really necessary, especially if you have +1 to hit. But yeah, you could do reroll all to hit, and then you could fish for more exploding 6s with Death Guard or something like that. You can give the Volkite +1 AP. For Death Guard, this can be done if the opponent, if you are inexorable play company and the opponent is under this contagion, maybe a forward unit that has flash outbreak. For Thousand Suns, there is a stratagem you can use, so it's easy to at least get AP -1. But again, the main damage from the Volkite Culverins, if you're shooting something with very high saves, is not so much the weapon, it's more the mortal wounds and the volume of fire. For Death Guard, the enemy can also be in contagion to have -1 toughness. It helps basically the strength. If you're fighting a toughness 7 thing and it's in enemy contagion range, it will be toughness 6, and then you're wounding on 4 pluses. You can give reroll once to wound. For Death Guard, if you use the corrosion stratagem, it costs you 2 command points, and then you can with another unit that has a plague weapon, you can basically target something, and then the Volkite, if you really need something to go down, then the Volkite Contemptors can be rerolling once to wound, giving you a bit more mortal wounds, hopefully. Thousand Suns, the Infernal Master can give it +1 strength to the range weapon, so basically like having the enemy in contagion, you will have strength 7 Culverins, which could be helpful across some targets. So, looking now at the Contemptor damage output versus the General Yanis 31 targets, this is point corrected damage output. So here we have the Contemptor with the 2 twin Culverin, the Volkites here, 150 points. So we have the average 4 wounds across the number of targets, and we see that the Contemptor, because it has the Volkites, because they have mortal wounds, they are quite strong, basically equally strong against things with very high invul saves and things that don't have invul saves, like intercessors here, or something like a Space Marine Captain or something that has invul saves. And the mortal wounds, they are also good against the 1 wound targets. Then we see for Thousand Suns, the gray line, if they can buff it fully, giving it +1 to hit, rerolling once, it gets AP1 and it gets +1 strength from the Infernal Master. The damage can be 6 wounds per 100 points. This is point corrected. So because this is costing 150 points, the actual damage would be 1.5 times this. So for example, against an Imperial Knight here, 3 wounds, that would be 4 or 5 wounds on an Imperial Knight. A buffed Thousand Suns would be giving maybe 7.5 wounds on an Imperial Knight here. And then for Death Guard, because we have Talisman, we can also get the Plague, the Corrosion, rerolling once to wound. Death Guard can buff the damage even higher, and this is mostly due to the exploding 6s from the Talisman. So here we get an average of 11 wounds, a whopping 11 wounds, something like for example, like a Hive Tyrant here, 10 wounds, point corrected, that would be 15 wounds on a Hive Tyrant, or 7 times 1.5, that would be 10.5 wounds on an Imperial Knight. So that's very strong damage output over the whole range of targets. So yeah, buffing can really do some very crazy damage and very high damage, regardless of the type of target. So let's look at some contenders to do some damage. For Death Guard, let's We'll focus here on non-Forgeworld models. So we need to find something that has some shooting. And here I've been limiting to say we need at least 24-inch range. The Contemptors can stay back and shoot from long range with the Volkites. At least we need something that should have a 24-inch range. And the units that come to mind are these here. We have the Helbrute. The shooty option is the multi-melta and the missile. It's 120 points only, and it's core, so this is quite positive. And also, I'm looking also some other weapons. They can have a twin las cannon, etc. The Plaguebear Scroller with entropy cannons and slugger is a good candidate. A 36-inch range on the cannons, some high damage. The mortar, always a good shooty unit. And then the Mephitic Blightholder, it has basically also a multi-meta and a missile at 24-inch range. So it's basically like a Helbrute at this range, but costs more. And yeah, it cannot be buffed so much as its core. The Mephitic Blightholder, basically taking some of the results in advance, is better at shorter range because the multi-melta does better. It has also the Bile Spurt. It's better in melee than the other alternatives, but as a shooty long range thing, it's not optimal in this role. And then we have the Defiler with, for example, the most shooty option would be, for example, something like a twin las cannon or a twin heavy bolter and the Havoc launcher. It has also the cannon, which is quite strong, but it's also costing 185 points. So let's look at the death card contenders, their damage output unbuffed. And here we have the blue line is the Contemptor with twin Volkites with no buffs, and the orange is the crazy buffed with Talisman and rerolls and everything, all the death card buffs. And here we see the contenders here, the contestants to get the to come close to the Contemptor. We see the yellow line is the Plaguebear Scroller with the entropy and the slugger. And we see for some targets with high toughness and vehicles with no inval saves, the Plaguebear Scroller has better damage unbuffed than an unbuffed Contemptor Dreadnought. And then we have, so here we have just taking the average of all across the 31 targets. This is still point corrected. So the Contemptor with the Culverins Volkites is 4 damage, the Plaguebear Scroller is 3.2, and then the others come further down. The Helbrute is around 2 wounds across the targets. The Mephitic Blightholder is a bit lower because it costs 140 points, and then the Defiler is the second after the Plaguebear Scroller. But even unbuffed, the Contemptor Volkite is better versus most target, and the Plaguebear Scroller, as I said, could be a bit better versus some high toughness, no inval save targets. Then looking at what can we do if we can buff them, basically the Helbrute being core can be buffed considerably, but most of the other, the Plaguebear Scroller, the Defiler, and the Mephitic Blightholder, they cannot be buffed very significantly. Basically, the buffs you can have is that the enemy can be in contagion. You can have the Inexorable to get a bit more AP. It can help, for example, the Mortar of the Plaguebear Scroller. And then for the Plaguebear Scroller, we have the Mortar stratagem to give the Mortar a damage 3. The Helbrute basically can get all the buffs as the Contemptor could get, rerolls, +1 to hit from Talisman, exploding 6s. It has even easier access to buffing because it can use the Fire Fever strat to reroll hits and wounds, and if it's damaged, it will be naturally rerolling once to wound. So we can see here with if we include everything that we can buff, the Helbrute becomes the best option basically, but it's not close to the Volkite Contemptor, the orange line, only for a few targets. Then the green line is the Plaguebear Scroller when we use the Mortar stratagem, and then having the enemy in contagions. Then we have the Defiler, then we have the Mephitic Blightholder. It's not so easy to buff vehicles in 40k. That's why the core Contemptor is so strong. So Helbrute is something that could come as closest the damage if you can buff it significantly. So summary here, so here we have the unbuffed damage, here we have the buff damage. So a buffed Contemptor or almost 11 wounds on average. The Helbrute is a distant second, 5.6. The Plague Scroller 4.4, etc. It's very difficult to reach this high level of damage shooting power. And here you see the unbuffed damage. The Plague Scroller has the best unbuffed damage at range. We see here Defilers with other weapon, or a Chaos Predator with last cannons, etc. Helbrute with other weapons. They don't come as close as these weapons here. So simply put, the Contemptor damage output when it's unbuffed is the best. When it's buffed, it's clearly the best, and it's unreachable for other Death Guard units. The Helbrute comes closest, but quite distant. The Helbrute, unfortunately, will be lacking in the range, only 24 inch for the multi-melta. The durability is bad, the mobility is bad, only 6 inches, but especially the durability, you would be needing to be closer to shoot, and then probably your Helbrutes are gone. The Plague Scroller is the best option overall in my opinion. Considering the range, it can stay back, it's very durable, but as I write here, probably you already include Plague Scrollers in your competitive list, and you would, yeah, I use a couple, and then the Volkite Contemptors. If I need to substitute the Volkite Contemptors, I can't have more than 3 Plague Scrollers. The Defiler can also do something, but not as much, as point efficiently as the Plague Scroller or of course the Contemptor. The Mephitic Blightholder, not the best option at long range. At shorter range, it comes more to life. It also has some melee capabilities. So the Mephitic Blightholder, of course, also can do something, but it's not in the same role as a Contemptor can do. For the Demon Engines, the Defiler, the Plague Scroller, and the Mephitic Blightholder, Epidemius, if you summon him, you can give them reroll once, then it would increase their damage output by 17%. It will not come to these 11 crazy wounds. So all in all, it's very difficult to find something for Death Guard. You just plug and play something that does the same damage as a Contemptor. It's simply not possible. So looking then from a Thousand Suns point of view, and again looking at non-Forgeworld models, what would we have to replace a Volkite Contemptor? Again, looking at shooting from range, at least 24 inch. We have again the Helbrute, multi-melta and missile for 120 points. It's a core unit also, of course, and it has importantly the invul save. The shootiest Thousand Sun specific, let's say, monster or vehicle, the Forgefiend, with 2 autocannons and an ectoplasma is the most shooty version for 175 points. The Vindicator plus a Havoc launcher, unfortunately only 24 inch range on the Demolisher cannon, and maybe surprisingly, maybe one of the best units to replace would be Scarab Occult Terminators. They are, of course, core, and they have the Soul Reaper cannon with high volume of shots with high AP, and they also have the Hellfire missiles, and they, as core, they can also be buffed considerably. They can get extra strength from the Infernal Master, +1 to hit, rerolling, extra bolter shots, +1 to wound with a stratagem, etc. So that could be an interesting way to compare the damage with the Contemptor. And then we have, of course, the Mutalith Vortex Beast. It's not so much a shooty, but it can do some mortal wounds, maybe 2 to 3 mortal wounds per phase, depending on the opponent, but doesn't have any shooting. It has this basically something like comparable to psychic powers. Looking at the damage unbuffed, here we have the blue line is the Volkite Contemptor. And buffed, the orange line is the Thousand Suns buffed Contemptor. And here we have the yellow line is the Forgefiend with 2 autocannons and the Ectoplasma. It's a bit better than an unbuffed Contemptor against some vehicles with no invul saves, but mostly, as you can see, the the Volkite Contemptor unbuffed is better than all the other unbuffed units. The light blue is the Scarab Terminators with the Soul Reaper Cannon and the Hellfire missile. And then we have the green is the Vindicator, and the gray is the Thousand Suns Helbrute with multi-melta and missile. So yeah, not so yeah. Again, the Volkon is clearly better even unbuffed. If we consider what we can do to buff the other Thousand Suns unit, the Thousand Suns have a good thing that they can buff also the vehicles with +1 to hit with psychic powers and +1 strength on the range weapons. So if we see here with fully buffs, the Scarab Terminators are a very strong option, especially here with no invul save targets. They come even very close to the buffed Contemptor. And importantly, to give them +1 to wound with a stratagem. It's costly 2 command points, but then they would also be wounding vehicles on 4 pluses. So +1 strength would give them some especially the combi bolters becoming strength 5 is really strong. The missiles become strength 9, etc. Then we have the Forgefiend can also come quite nice increase with a +1 to hit and giving it more AP with a stratagem and +1 strength. The Forgefiend also can come a bit higher here. Then we have the Vindicator, and then we have the Helbrute. So the fully buffed Scarabs is really a strong option, as I said, especially with targets without invul saves, and targets with invul saves. We also have a lot of psychic mortal wounds we can do to them and not need to shoot them with mortal wounds. So summary for Thousand Suns. Here we have the base, the Contemptor, unbuffed and buffed, average damage point corrected per 100 points. And here we have the Scarab Occult Terminators come quite close, around 7.6 wounds for a buffed Contemptor with Volkites, 6.3 for a unit of 5 Scarab Occult Terminators, the Forgefiend, and then we have the Vindicator, and then the Helbrute with multi-melt and missile. So the Contemptor is still the highest damage dealer. However, the distance to the others is not so large. And Thousand Suns have the nice benefit that a lot of good buffing can be given to non-core units, +1 to hit and +1 strength from the Pacts of the Infernal Master. The fully buffed Scarab Occult Terminators seem to be a very good alternative, but yet again, like the Plaguebearer Scroller for the Death card, they are probably already in the competitive lists, and maybe you need to find something else to replace a Contemptor with Volkites. Then probably a Forgefiend. A shooty Forgefiend could be a good option. Finally, briefly, let's look at some other alternatives from Forgeworld. Of course, the Contemptor doesn't need to only have the Volkite Culverins. It could have a lot of other weapons. We have also the Decimator. It has the interesting Soul Burners that can do mortal wounds in the shooting, and then we have the Leviathan, basically a heavier Dreadnought, a heavier Contemptor. A heavier Dreadnought than the Contemptor, but doesn't have the core. The Decimator doesn't have the core. And if we look here, I listed the unbuffed damage output, the Leviathan with grav cannons and the Volkites, the mini Volkites that it can have. It's a bit more costly, 220 points. Unbuffed, it comes quite close to the Contemptor with the 2 Culverins. The Decimator with the 2 Soul Burners is in the 3rd spot. And then the Contemptor with other weapons, multi-meltas, etc., plasmas, is not very close to the Contemptor with twin Culverins. The other Contemptors with other weapons, they start from a lower baseline, but you can still buff them with Talisman or +1, rerolls, etc. But the Leviathan and the Decimator, they come closest unbuffed, but they cannot be buffed very much as vehicles. Of course, Thousand Suns can still buff them, but but again, nothing that starts with a better than the Contemptor with new Volkite Culverins. So reaching to the summary and final thoughts, basically it's not easy to find any good alternative or a good replacement for a buffed Volkite Contemptor. It has clearly the highest damage ranged output. It's easily buffed. The core makes it very strong. The 45-inch range, mortal wounds, the versatility for damage across all targets. You have some units that can be quite good versus vehicles, but then they're not so good against hordes, etc., etc. The Volkite Contemptor is basically super versatile in its shooting. Therefore, also it's very difficult to find something that can one-for-one replace it. For Death Guard, the Plaguebearer Scroller with Entropy Cannon and Slugger is a good shooting option, but probably you already have that in the list. Maybe considering the Defiler, maybe the Helbrute, maybe the Mephitic Blightholder. Mostly for Death Guard, it's probably going to be that you need to come closer, for example, with Mephitic Blightholders, Defilers, to do something shooty like the Contemptor, but still, yeah, it reigns supreme, and it's difficult to find something better. For the Thousand Suns, the Contemptor baseline is lower than for Death Guard, and the Thousand Suns, they have a lot of psychic powers and mortal wounds as extra weapon versus pesky targets. Maybe they don't need the Volkite Contemptors as much as Death Guard. The Scarab Occult Terminators that are also omnipresent in every Thousand Suns list, they can do very high damage, and they can do versatile damage with a high AP. They also have psychic powers, etc. They can come really close to a Contemptor with Volkites in a Thousand Suns list. Otherwise, the Forgefiend with autocannons and ectoplasma can also be buffed quite okay with psychic powers, and could be a good option from a more ranged shooting approach. For other, as I said, other Forgeworld units, nothing is as good right now from the ones I've been looking at than the Volkites and the missile launcher for the Contemptor. So with these words, this concludes the video. What do you think about the analysis? Have you found? Do you have any other, let's say, Forgeworld model I should be looking at for a potential replacement for a Contemptor? Let me know what you think the analysis for the Death Guard or for the Thousand Suns. And if you like this video, please press like and subscribe to my channel. If you like to further support my efforts to bringing you this the in-depth analysis, please visit my Patreon page, become a patron. I'll also put a library of the results there, so you can have a link and find the results I've been talking about, for example, in this video. And with these words, General Yanis is signing out. Stay safe out there, and bye-bye.